Well, let's talk about this for the next few minutes. Let's go live to Washington and talk to Ali Shihabi, who's an executive director of the Arabia Foundation, a think tank focusing on the geopolitics of the Arabian Peninsula. Thank you so much for being here with us on the programme. Your reading of this move, are these states right that Qatar is actually supporting terror groups?
Yes, I mean, this has been simmering for 20 years now. Qatar, in its desire to sort of behave independently in the Gulf, has maintained relations on all sides of the spectrum. And I think, you know, if you want to be part of an alliance and if you want to work cohesively to stand up to Iranian expansionism in the region and to deal with extremism and the problem that that's causing, particularly terrorism, all members have to be disciplined. And I think what you've seen today, the action taken, is really that the key Gulf states and the key members of the alliance, which is Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have decided that they really have to escalate their pressure on Qatar to drive home that point. And closing the borders and the airspace particularly are two unprecedented steps that haven't been taken before.
I'll come back to the practicalities in a moment, yes. But you made the point right at the start that this has been ongoing, this tension, this friction for years. So it begs the question, why make this move now?
Well, I mean, numerous attempts have been made. You know, just 4 or 5 months ago, the Saudi king visited Qatar, for example. So I think there's been a continuous effort to bring the Qataris into the fold. But I think now with the sort of alliance taking shape and with the American administration getting actively involved in that, I think it was felt that everybody had to be brought into line. You know, critics are commenting that, you know, the Gulf Arabs are getting into a food fight again. Well, I mean, another way to look at it is that this shows the strength of a building alliance that has a capacity to discipline a member that's stepping out of line. And I think that element of discipline becomes all the more important if you're going to have an effective alliance.
Is there more also behind it? You talked of President Trump. Does the Saudis' position on Iran dovetail with the Americans' position on Iran? Because the Saudis are accused of doing exactly this, which is funding extremists. There's a report here in the UK about Saudi financing of terror groups that hasn't been published so far. Is there more behind this?
Well, I like these reports that about Saudi funding of terrorism that have never been published, because there are a lot of those, but I haven't seen any hard evidence. So when you have hard evidence, it should be brought forward, but really there is no hard evidence. It's a bit like the 28 pages of the 9/11 report, where they created mystery for a decade, and then when they came out, there was nothing there. So there is no evidence that Saudi Arabia has been supporting, you know, extremism or supporting extremist groups. There is simply no hard evidence. In fact, the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury in the U.S. Treasury, in a statement to Congress under oath last year, called Saudi Arabia the regional leader in fighting terrorism and fighting terrorism finance.
Let me ask you very briefly, we've only got about 20 seconds left. Do you think Qatar will fall into line, given what you said about the practicalities of closing border, trade, diplomats, politicians, food?
I mean, if Qatar decides not to fall into line, it's going to pay a very heavy price. So one would think that if they were going to be logical, they would fall into line very soon.